4, 3, 2, and 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Art of Move podcast with myself, Anthony Manuele, my good friend, Dr. William Rajbar. We're out here in the Canadian Rockies, here to provide you our attempt at finding the grand unified theory of human movement and biomechanics. We're joined here by our friend David Weck, the founder of WeckMethod, the inventor of the Bosu Ball, and a gazillion other really cool inventions that are kind of pioneering a new way to train biomechanical efficiency, gait mechanics more efficiently, and just a bunch of really cool things that we're going to get into. We've had a few really great episodes with David already. And so thank you, David, for joining us again. I'm really excited to kind of talk to you more about the WeckMethod products and talk about their training applications, how you came to invent them, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, what I would say is that the Bosu Ball really kicked it off, but prior to the Bosu Ball, when I was personal training in Manhattan apartments, what I did back then was I fashioned up something similar to a TRX that you could mount in the door and give people something to lean back on to do squats like easily. You're talking about general population, not super strong or fit in the beginning anyway. And I had a broom handle that had a center line, and I would use that as sort of, I would provide the resistance and we would do many exercises with it. So I was in that sort of inventing mentality of how can I bridge the divide from, helping someone do some movement better. And those tools can really scale to remedial. And then you can go very far with them. But I would characterize the Bosu Ball as a flash of inspiration. It was falling off the stability ball and just being like, okay, I'm not going to risk that again. I don't want to break my neck. What can I do? What can I do? What if I cut the ball in half? And it was like, oh my gosh. And I recognized just that it was going to be a special product instantly. And so it literally,
you saw Paul check on a Swiss ball, right?
That the first impetus for me to stand on the ball was an internet picture of Paul Chek standing on a ball with 135 pounds on his back. And it just put the idea in my mind like, oh, let me try and stand on it. And, I did it very carefully. I held onto a pull-up bar so I couldn't fall and, sort of got my positioning and, felt it. And then got very good at it, but not good enough to not fall as I pushed the envelope, particularly in the yin, where I closed my eyes and tilted my head is how I fell off it the night that it was an instant fall where I did a backflip. I landed across and I started kicking my feet to make sure I could still kick them under my own volition. I was that scared by the event. And so the Bosu Ball was a ready, fire, aim approach. I built a prototype the day that I thought of it on a Friday night, and the Saturday I built it, and Sunday the glue was dry and I tested it and it worked. So, and I knew the utility would be profound and widespread. So I was very excited that this could secure my financial future is really what I was super excited about. And helping people, of course, providing value. So it's, it's not a trick, but that's what set it off. And then the rest of the inventions were really perspiration as I ticked and tacked my way toward greater understanding of function, because I was coming at this from next to no knowledge of what I know now. So I just knew the conventional stuff, back in the beginning, because that's essentially what I had done. Bigger, faster, stronger was sort of, the approach. I knew nothing about the feet, knew nothing about the hands, knew nothing about coiling the core. So, it was ignorance, I guess, and having the wherewithal from the Bosu Ball to have the time and the resources, the financial wherewithal to do whatever I needed to do. So I flew to New York City, and I lived in New York City for like 6 weeks so I could train privately with William C.C. Chen, who's like a Tai Chi master. And he's a real one. He's not, one of these pretend guys. He can actually, throw down, as it were. But he also had very high level skill that I could feel, and the feeling is the understanding. Now you have a destination of what it's supposed to be. And he was very, very generous as a teacher, to very giving. Some teachers hoard because they don't want you to know their level, right? The more confident you are, the more you're not afraid of being embarrassed by some guy, who's not as far along as you, and you push him around. Well, what do you have, right? So in the chronological order, it was the Bosu Ball, and then a product called the Bosu Bola, and then it became the Quick Hands Bola. And it was two soft balls, like sort of soft baseballs kind of thing, tethered by an elastic cord. And I would bounce it and shoot it out and catch it, spin it and catch it, twirl it around for the hands. And it was an incredibly dexterous invention that could bite you. We put a speed gun on it, and I went above 110 miles an hour, snapping it out. The cord is 2 feet, 26 inches or whatever, and it snaps out to 4 or 5 feet, and then bang, 110 miles an hour.
Because a bola is one of those primitive hunting instruments, right? It's the two implements with a string in the middle that you kind of whip around. And so you create. So what was the training application? What was the mindset of building something like that? What were you thinking biomechanically that would stimulate?
So the impetus for that was Pendulum Study. So I just happened to have some elastic cord and a hacky sack, and I taped the hacky sack onto the elastic cord, and I'm holding the top of the elastic cord, and I was experimenting with my balance in lieu of this pendulum effect, and then the visual tracking of looping the pendulum over, sensing it, catching it, right? Catching it. So you're getting the visual vestibular tracking that will upset balance until you can reconcile it and put it all together. So that was the impetus. And because it was an elastic cord, when I was done with my set or my exploration, I would just bounce it and it would pop up and I'd catch it. And then I became fascinated by that, like for coordination. And I was like, oh, wow, bing, quick catch, bing, catch, bing, catch. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to put another one on, make it a little heavier so that it has its own integrity. And now I've got this ultimate eye-hand coordination device. And I built, what I do is I build prototypes to, test the concept, and I got great feedback from it. The problem is that it's such a skill-dependent tool that it's hard to get on first base and have fun with it. And it will bite you. If you're not good at it, it'll break your glasses kind of thing if you try to do something that you're not ready to do with it. Right. I think if Duncan had invented his yo-yo today, he wouldn't sell barely any. But because he invented it in a time when there wasn't other options, they've sold hundreds of millions of yo-yos have been sold. Yeah. But if they invented it today, it would be a small niche product where they'd barely sell 10,000 units. Like, that's what I think. Because who can compete with the video stuff?
Yeah. Well, the yo-yo was my favorite thing growing up. Like I was really, really big into yo-yos when I was a kid, and then video games came out, and that's what killed my obsession with yo-yos and sports in general too. Like I was very, very persuaded by video. Sorry, well, I totally cut you off there. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. I was just gonna say, is that why it's not out in market right now? Because it's not a product that you have, right?
Yeah, what happened was I did prototypes, and then I got manufacturing, and I bought the first purchase order of 2,500 units, and it just took me too long to sell through them. And if you're just sitting on inventory, that's cash that's not cash until you can sell it. And so, if it takes you too long to sell it, well, then, the real time necessity isn't there. So I just abandoned it. And maybe we'll pick it up once we become, ubiquitous.
Sounds like something
well, because Will has things that are kind of similar for boxing, where he has the thing that he straps to his head, and it's the ball on.
Oh yeah. I mean, you're punching the ball,
the coordination, right? And you're kind of punching the ball.
that's a lot thinner of an elastic, so there's more travel and distance, and the penalty is not, it won't knock you out or give you a black eye if you miss, right? But it's the same concept, and it's a great training tool. I mean, it's cat-like reflexes. Reflexes. You know, if you play with your cat and you take the thing and you wow, I mean, they love it because it's sort of it's that preparation for the hunt that is inherent in the predator. Like the baby lion cubs that are, you know, fighting and wrestling are just rehearsing for later, right? They're learning how to, because when a lion kills the, you know, the water buffalo or whatever, it has the incisors, those fangs, they have the delicate ability to come in and not puncture the carotid artery. They can come next to it and pinch it, which creates a much faster extinguishment of life. If you can pinch the blood to the brain, that's the fastest way you can knock someone out from, you know, lack of oxygen to the brain. If I pierce the carotid, then there's a bleed out time that'll take a lot longer. So the dexterity and the skill of most animals' mouths. And what do you fear on a predator? You fear the mouth is what you fear the most, right? Because that's what they're attacking with most of the time. But anyway, that's little diversion off of sort of that concept, or, you know, that invention was next. And then the next invention after that, let me think. I think that, sorry, I'm going to turn off my email. I apologize.
Yeah, that's all good.
There we go. I think the next invention after that, I started twirling a staff. So that's not an invention, but I started training intensively with the staff. And because the staff gives you that reliable means of it's exactly the same shape, no matter what orientation it has. So you have a very consistent tool to calibrate with. But the issue with the staff is that it bites you hard if you mess up, or if you're going really fast, you have to be in an area where you're not going to put it through the TV screen type of thing, right? So it has its limitations if you're a regular person. And then from the staff and the bola derived the rope and not jumping the rope as the innovation. So my invention of rope training was to just say, train with it, do all that your body is capable of doing, but don't jump through it. And now we have to rotate. You don't have a choice. And you have the continuity of two tin cans communicating in perfect real-time synchronicity where you have true feedback. And I'm really on this kick of true now, like true. And this idea of true balance, meaning true balance is 100% balance that's right now ready. And anything but true balance has a protective extraneous tension in the body to make up for the fact that you don't have the true balance. And I don't, and now I'm of the mindset of like, look, walking is the most universal generalized function that we do in terms of movement is walking. And so everybody does it, and it's simple to do very poorly, and it's simple to do very well. And it's just the knowledge is power of if I position my head over my foot and then I intend to, when I land, the head is already there. I'm landing from empty to full with a perfect exchange and delivery reception where my lower back doesn't have to tension that cantilever effect. Because if I'm in the middle and I step here and I'm falling that way, well, this lower back has to, you know, that's one drop of water that you don't feel, you don't notice, it doesn't matter. But after,
and I really don't want people to glaze over what you said there either with the fact that when anything opposite of true biomechanical efficiency is going to create a compensatory pattern. And it was that thing that we talked about it on one of the previous episodes we had with you, where in the brace the core model, where you're keeping your spine rigid as a passive column when you're stepping, it's kind of in that middle. And then the way that people diagnose it is, if you can't keep your balance, it's because you have weak QLs. But a weak QL,
oh my God,
a QL tensioning is a compensatory pattern for a lack of actual spinal movement as you're locomoting, right? So this idea, the reason that we harp on biomechanics so much in this show is because of this phenomenon. I think it was summed up so well there. And I'm sorry for interrupting, but I really wanted people to that's like, for me anyway, the reason that I was sold on biomechanics was that aha moment, was the idea that there is a right way to move. And it doesn't mean that the body can't be conditioned to move in unfavorable positions and that you can't condition yourself. You can't be more ready for these other awkward positions. It's just that the human body is built in a way and structured in a way so that if you move biomechanically correct, there are less compensatory patterns and your body has to like stabilize itself less in awkward ways in order to deal with those behaviors.
Yeah. And name for me an animal that doesn't have true balance. Like, name for me an animal that, and I'm not talking about an injured, genetically muted animal. I'm talking about a cat, a dog, a squirrel, a rabbit, a deer, a leopard, an elephant, a giraffe. They all move with true balance, because if they didn't, they wouldn't pass on their genes. It's all about efficiency. Every calorie counts in that game. They don't have plenty, right? They're on the brink of starvation at all times, or being eaten at all times. So they have no choice but to move so well. And we, the frontal cortex, can confuse us with intelligence that just misses the mark. And the gait guys, okay, you're the gait guys. I used to watch them all the time, and then I start figuring stuff out. I'm like, wait a minute here. You're telling this girl that you stand on one leg and she goes that, and now the diagnosis is the QL is weak and disengaged. You put her in an impossible position that nobody could balance in. Not Cirque du Soleil couldn't balance there. And so that's proof, again, that you don't know what you're talking about. And it's a sense of irresponsibility that a fitness industry, look at how fit we are. We have an industry devoted to fitness? Are you kidding me? How well is that industry doing? Now, most people don't care, okay? We can't capture their attention to work out for 2 hours a day and listen to 2-hour podcasts about, gait. So what do? Simplify it and make the thing that they do already perfectly balanced with the simplest cue ever, HOF, head over foot. Even Naughty Aguilar agrees with me, because he does it, and he didn't do it before I told him about it. So he learned, and if he can learn, who the hell? I mean, everybody can learn. And the fitness industry has to start taking responsibility for the things that we teach. And the number one most important thing to teach is a foundation that can build upon, that's not a castle made out of sand. And so you've got all these experts now championing this, like, oh, we got to brace your core rigid, which is starting to ebb away, okay? Because now what's happening is, they're discovering the coil. Oh, they call it something else, and they say this, but now they're doing what I was doing 5, 6, however many years ago. You see what I mean? And now what I want to do is, again, positive peer pressure to the industry that the consequence for being wrong is embarrassment. Okay, well, get over it. Just do what's right. You know what I mean? Like, so, and it's head over foot. And we'll get back to the inventions, but it really is, all of my inventions are really contingent upon the manner in which you use them and the muscle memory carryover that they give you. So I'm agnostic as far as the invention itself. Like, it makes no difference to me, right? It's just, is it useful? Does it get me across the river that I'm trying to traverse? Okay. And then you can take any generic product and start to employ strategies where you get more utility from it. And you can enhance even bodybuilding with this stuff, where you get a double effect. You get the tissue development, but you're also getting the capacity to move with fluidity and grace. It will help you pose on stage, for example. So I really think that, the cool kids in class, I am so fortunate now that I have a great relationship with Mark Bell. I have a great relationship with Kelly Starrett. I'm going to meet Joe DeFranco and be on his podcast in June. And I think what we have to do is we have to have sort of a league of justice of, sort of in the fitness industry to say, what side are you on? Do you know how to locomote, walk strong? Or are you personally, and then teaching, even worse, someone to do it with inefficiency just layered in because biomechanically you've instructed them to do something that we should not do for that particular function? And if you want to lift a heavy weight or pick up a big thing, of course you're going to, lock it and be, super stiff and tight. Okay, great. And that I'm not against that. I'm very for that. I like the idea of pressure management. As much pressure as you can endure, that's the key to strength. And so it has its place, but it is not in walking. And again, positive peer pressure. And that's why I told you about that Lance Brooks, the locomotion guy. Because here you have a guy who touts that he's a scientist, and he hates everything that I do. The Bosu Ball, he can't stand it, and so anything that I do is just outright rejected. But it's like, okay, now we're going to put up or we're going to shut up, and we don't have to like each other. We don't got to do nothing like that. Doesn't matter, regardless. Who cares? But we're not. I am not going to stand by and let the fitness industry continue to abuse the general population with misinformation. So, and I don't want a ministry of truth. I want every individual to assess for themselves, given the knowledge, to say, oh, if I do it this way, does it feel better? And Matt Fury says it takes 21 days to form a habit. So what I would encourage everybody in fitness to do is spend 21 days where every step you take, just be mindful that you want to put your head over your foot and feel how it feels. And if you do it for 21 days, then you never have to think about it ever again for the rest of your life, but you do it right. Because it's so simple to do correct, and it's so simple to do incorrect, meaning it's labored and burdened with inefficiency that adds up to back pain.
And so
right?
Will and I have talked about the cue head over foot a lot, because we had recent debates about this idea of training attributes versus training the byproducts of movements that occur from attributes. And Will said, well, I've used the cue head over foot over and over and over again. I think this is kind of like, why wouldn't you just train head over foot? And why would you try to train the attributes of how your spinal engine would move over just training the behavior? And this is exactly it. Like, the behavior shows up and then you're not wrecking your back over millions of steps, right? Like it's a low hanging fruit.
Well, and what I would say is that exaggeration is extremely valuable. So walking is simple. Everybody can do it. You can grab a Budweiser out of the fridge, no problem. Regardless of how fit or not you are, walking is easy for most people, okay? Or at least it's perceived as such. It's like, what do you mean, practice walking? What, right? But so many people do it so poorly that that compensatory tension, the protective tension, adds up to this, you're taking 1 million steps out of balance. How do you think your back is going to feel after that? It's just not going to be good. But when you're training the coil to go to those polarities of the absolute maximum length and maximum intent and the maximum coil, so now everything else less than that, you just catch. And you don't have to think about it. You have the extremes on both sides. So now your body can just interpret the next task without any conscious thought whatsoever, which is not, conscious thought will fail you in the moment in real time. Mm-hmm. So right. It needs to be reduced to the muscle memory.
So,
go ahead.
Earlier you were saying they're starting to embrace the coil, or I think you called it the coil, but head over foot. I've been looking and I haven't found anybody actually doing it other than this micro niche. Do you know anyone else who's starting to be able to say foot?
Yeah, well, Justin James is a world champion long drive golf competitor, and I trained him to win the championship. We had an 11. He went from 216 ball speed to 226 or 227, I think, in the championship to win it. And at that time, that was the world record for the ball speed, and it went the furthest distance in that competition. And he gave a presentation at the World Golf Summit put on by TPI. And he basically stood up in front of everybody and said, listen, you guys are smarter than me in this department of biomechanics and do all that stuff, but I'm just going to tell you what I do. He said, I don't do any of the stuff that, is anti, and I don't train decelerators. I train the coil, and here's the things that I do. And you basically had, from the presenter crew, you had pure silence. Like, nobody came up to him afterward and spoke to him about it. And they just, were sitting there. But all the participants who are out there, not the ones on the stage, they were coming up to Justin afterward and being like, Justin, wow, I've never heard this before. Tell me more. Tell me more. So now apparently TPI, and I like the guys up there, and they do a lot of great stuff, but now TPI is starting to factor this stuff in because they're exposed to Justin all the time, and it yields better results. So ultimately the results dictate what we should do. And so that's just an example of an evolution. And then you have Mike Boyle starting to qualify his anti-rotation. Well, by anti-rotation, I don't mean no movement whatsoever. Or, I don't mean bracing it totally solid. Well, okay, that's not what you said a couple of years ago, right? And what was the impetus for you to change your opinion so skillfully, right? Right? And so, and it's those kind of things. Like, I'm ashamed of the fitness industry because so much of it is this ego-driven nonsense that you're not working for the cause, you're working for yourself. And if your expertise is challenged, so many people, and Mike Boyle presents himself as like, oh, I am the guy. What I taught you last year, hey, that's wrong. Now I'm updating it, right? It's like, well, keep doing that, dude, right?
Yeah.
you gotta get the first base, right? And all this functional training, the biggest knock on it is you don't get strong. And I believe in getting as strong as you can possibly be, but doing so in a manner that has 100% carryover to throwing, swinging, locomotion, and locomotion in all directions. So again, this idea that,
like, I love that, because that was one of the harder things that I was trying to reconcile, moving from very heavy weightlifting, very strength oriented, like how can I maximize the recruitment of my motor units style training, which made me feel alive and I loved it, but I moved like shit, frankly speaking. Like, I moved horribly. And now I'm like, this podcast has been around for maybe 6 months, and I've been in functional movement pattern training for maybe less than a year, but I move way better, but I am not nearly as conventionally strong as I was. And the definition of strength as it pertains to functional fitness, I think, for me, how I used to define strength was how tense could I make myself? How much tension could I produce to move or withstand the resistance of an object and move an object? And to me, strength was the skill of generating tension. Now, strength as it pertains to gait, as it pertains to swinging a club, as it pertains to throwing something. Now, in my mind, there's also an element of being able to command elastic power of the fascia and to have biomechanical efficiency as well. But I don't really know how to clearly define strength as it pertains to functional fitness. So when you say you really believe in getting strong, how do you define strong? How do you define strength in general?
well, I think the person on the planet, there's a few people on this planet who have taken my training and surpassed my capacity to do, right, because they're physically superior to me. Chris Chamberlain is that person. And if you look at how strong he is, by every single measure, he can deadlift more than he could before. Okay, so he's up in that 600-ish pound range to deadlift. He can pick up a 400-pound sandbag. He can take a kettlebell that weighs 150 pounds or more and like snatch it and bump it in a clean. So, and he, because when you optimize the coil on one side and then you optimize the coil on the other and you do it correctly, then you optimize and strengthen the bilateral by virtue of going so deep into the side and side. And we define it as torsion. So there's an internal bilateral torsion, there's an external torsion. So we're not even talking flexion and extension, inversion, eversion. We are 3D everything. So we don't think of flexion. Everything has that spiral element, and we could call it flexion if we want, but I think it's important to use language precisely. So this idea of torsion, so I'll give you an example with Chris. If he's doing an external torsion squat, it's not to full depth. It's not ass to grass. If he's going to go full depth, well, then he's going to put more internal torsion into it than the external torsion. So, and if he's going to deadlift something super heavy, well, then he's going to internal torsion and take the slack out of that, as opposed to being here where there's, by definition, some slack because there's a contraction happening. And it's knowing exact. So he's the example of someone who is physically stronger in every single measure. And that's the way I think it should be. Like, I don't want to sacrifice my strength. I could swing a 200-pound kettlebell as long as my grip can hold it. So I'm up, I'm above 20 reps and it's just cold, pick the damn thing up and start swinging it. So I want to have strength where I can move another man. I view it as the fight and the flight, and the flight being objective and the fight being subjective. But I like feeling like I got better chances if someone were to attack me physically, that I am moving extremely well and I have strength to create damage if necessary without hurting myself. And I think that litmus test, I don't think other people in this functional space really think of that as the litmus test so much. I think it's two sides to the same coin. I think you have to be optimizing both to optimize either one. Personally, that's how I feel.
So could you run us through a coil? Could you run us through the proper way to do a coil and to maximize that, and maybe describe what you're doing so the audience can hear?
Absolutely. So basically, it stems back to the brachiation where you have the longest possible on one side. So if I have the longest possible reach on one side, now I give myself the opportunity on the coil side that my ninth rib's going to come down, and it's basically going to be in between the shoulder and the hip. And it may be your 8th or 10th rib, whatever. It's just right here. And that point will not move. So the other side is long. This point stays here. The hip is driving up and forward. The shoulder is driving down and back, but that didn't move. And so if I do this and I do this, I have that axis point of the coil. And so to do the coil with the absolute maximum intent to get the most from it is about going as long as you possibly can on one side and coiling with that specific relationship of the shoulder down and back, hip up and forward, about that axis point. If I move the axis point, now that would be governed to some function that I'm doing. I'm not getting the maximum training effect that will allow me to move that anywhere I want. By having the consistency, I have that relationship of the shoulder and the hip, and it makes movement feel so much easier, and you get so much stronger bilaterally because you can't dig into those millimeters that matter if you're bilateral. You just can't even get close to the lat fibers that knit down into the lumbar dorsal fascia. And the QL, people always talk about, the QL. The QL is a player on the team, but the guy who bats fourth and you give him the ball is the lats. If you get the lats right, well, then everybody else on the team plays great. But if you just focus on the QL, well, what's happening to your shoulder? What's happening to this one over here? It's the lats. The lats are you have a core and you have a sleeve, according to Ida Rolf, right? So all this stuff up here, traps and all that, that's the sleeve. And you have this more intrinsic core below. And the lats sort of, bridge the sleeve and the core. And the lumbodorsal fascia, if you want to harness connective tissue, that is like, it's Antarctica. It's this unexplored terrain of getting deep, deep, deep into lumbodorsal fascia with that lat connection that connects the pelvis and the hips to the shoulders.
Yeah.
So was that clear enough for just
Oh,
the
absolutely.
simplicity of the question?
Absolutely. Like, I noticed that when you're standing and doing one leg, you're coiling towards the leg that's up. And is that different from when both legs are on the ground? Because you have a royal coil where your front foot is also on the ground. You have a double foot and then a single foot, right? So what's the difference? What are you doing differently there?
Yeah, great question. So basically, when the foot is on the ground, I don't have any demands of balance, and I can put the weight into. So right now, my foot is up. Right now, my foot's on the ground, but I'm still on the coil side here. Okay. And so when I'm on the coil side, the same dynamic is happening, and it's easier for me to identify and get in the beginning with both feet on the ground. And so if I'm here and I can sort of step back with the leg and back, and I can verticalize, and I can go get that elbow down deep in the glute, shoulder down and back, hip up and forward, that's not moving, and then just reach that elbow up to the sky on the other side. That's the foundation. And then when I'm here, I can move without moving. So I can be weighted on that side, and then I can weight the other side, and I can lift this up, and I can march in place without disturbing that position. See how my knees are coming up?
Yeah.
So, but my center of mass is not changing. And then as I RMT and I move, this doesn't change. See how that keeps on going wherever it is in the straight line, versus if I'm doing this, then my center is going back and forth without the coil. So it's the coil is basically, it's adding everything up so that you're using everything in its correct proportion to make you shift your weight with the absolute most power. Nothing is leaking or bleeding out. You're lunging and you're moving. It's just so much easier. And now I want to give a shout out to everybody listening to Chung Z, or Chung Shi from Secrets of Athleticism, because
We were just talking about him.
what I'm now investing in so heavily is toe tension. And prior, I didn't recognize just how profound toe tension is until relatively recently. And it is transformative when you can make your toe tension so strong because of the longest muscles, both hallucis and digitorum, because those are the tips of the toes are connected up high in the shank. And without the tips of the toes engaged, you forego that long tendon. Even where the muscle is, it's all tendon. The entire thing is tendon. And it's a slow twitch muscle that you can invest in and train slowly because it's tendons, and you can overdo it and make yourself not feel very good if you go overdo it. But it's the coordination between this strength of extension and range of motion and spread and the claw. It's like you think of talons pressing down into the ground, and it's just absolutely incredible. So to give credit where credit is due, I went to his YouTube page. This guy's been saying that for 10 years now. I mean, or more. I don't know. The guy's been saying it for a long time, and I'm not familiar with everything that he does, but that aspect of it and the cueing and instruction, I think there is so much value there that I have personally opened up a new personal path of development. When I find something like the ropes, when I find something like that and I recognize how valuable it is, I dive in and I go after that 80% with the tenacity, where I'm just going to develop this. Then I'll go work on something else and let that gestate. And then when I come back to it, that 20%, I'll tackle another 80% of it. And I have a hill here in San Diego that I'm running, and I have never ascended a hill with greater ease and speed ever, not even close to what I'm capable of doing right now. As I combine the coil, right, and that rotational movement, so I'm landing on a spring, and now I know how to engage the big toe in particular. And I had never known or practiced that to nearly to the, what I used to do was I would just catch it as the natural movement happens. So I wasn't focused on it with intent. And if you're not focused on it with intent, well, then you can't distill it and make it great. You'll just get what you get naturally, right? So again, shout out, because what we have to do is we have to give credit where credit is due. I think that serves everybody. So we don't want to take credit for the things that we didn't pioneer, right? We want to give a shout out to the pioneers to encourage people to pioneer, right? And give the credit where credit's due. And I think that makes everybody look better, frankly. So I just wanted to, for your audience, check him out, right? Secrets of Athleticism. He talks about.
He's one of our he's our most requested audience, or most requested podcast guest right now. We've had about like 5 people reach out just in the last few days. Hey, have you heard of this guy? Can you get him on the show? So we'll reach out to him and we'll see if we can get him on the show.
Okay, I think that's awesome, because again, I view you guys as, you know, this can become a town square for the fitness industry where you guys do have a neutrality. I'll tell you that. I mean, you know, you guys give everybody a fair shake. If I were in your shoes, I would not be so kind. So you guys are the right guys to do it.
It's kind of the point of the show, right?
Yeah, it's why what we did is when we started the show, I know I took a mental note where it's like, I know that I'm going to find ideas that I like more than others, and I'm going to want to favor them, and I'm going to want to give them, you know, all the glory. And the point of this show is to not do that. It's to you know, if anyone's getting people results in a certain way, or they're making you know, a bit of a splash in the industry because they're talking about different ideas, and I think the word here is different. It's like, why are your ideas different? Why are your ideas producing results? What are the limitations of your ideas? Like, we want to get into all that, right? And that was the original intent of this show, was just to discuss biomechanics and go against, I think honestly, Will and I were kind of sick of the whole brace the core, linear lifting, mainstream fitness narrative. And we were just like, man, like, let's just talk about it over the show. And then it evolved into this sort of like, let's investigate all of this with anyone who has a, you know, a set of different ideas.
Yeah, well, we have principles too, right? That we go by.
Go ahead, Will.
I said we have principles too that we go by. We're not just, we have our, you know, favorite ideas at the time, but always open to new ideas. Maybe we didn't look at it the same. I always go back to certain things, even your shakers. I was just using them in the forest. I found a brand new application for them when so I was watching this Russian school of boxing, and the guy, the way he moves is his shoulder flies forward and he catches his shoulder with his foot. His head and his shoulder rip forward. It's opposite of what you think, but he's harnessing his imbalance to get back into balance. And I can use it with so I'll show you actually so you can see it. So I was using the shakers, and I was just doing this motion here, right? I put the shakers down, and now it becomes shoulder back and forth. And now I can use it here. So as soon as my head comes over here, I have this, and it shoots me forward, and I can catch it now. See that? Boom, boom.
I love
both sides.
Yes.
And it's just a small maneuver here, but I needed this to do it.
Will, do that same thing that you just did, which is awesome. I love it. And you can see it. It looks real, right? Now, do that same thing that you just did and claw your big toes into the ground. And just feel if you could feel anything.
It's faster. The problem is in boxing, but I have to coordinate this, right? Because I just got it.
Exactly. You got to strengthen and coordinate it. It doesn't come overnight because you're talking about tendon.
Well, in boxing, the reason I don't practice like that is because I want to move as fast as possible. So I want my foot on the ground the least amount of time as possible. So I'll practice it with the big toe clawing, but my thought process is more footwork.
Well, what's very interesting is as the big toe especially gets stronger, you're able to coordinate the tension and the claw. So you don't have to be like clawing like that with that intent. That's the training that gives you the ability to build the strength and use it. But in action, you're no longer even thinking about that. You're getting more like appropriate measure of tension at the appropriate time. And there's tremendous value in sliding the feet as well. So Manny Pacquiao's jumping around, right? Moving like that. But there's some fighters, Mayweather is more like grounded when he fights. So he's not like jumping into position. So what I have found now is that both sides utilized, I'm going to always go to that first because my toes, I was not doing this kind of training. I was only really focused on this kind of training. Served me very well for a lot of things, but now it's both sides. Like I need to know both sides of something to understand the totality and then have the wherewithal wherever it lands according to those polarities. So both and every like it's like I'm not even obeying my own rule when I am only on one side, and it's so and I can bring some some understanding to some of the cueing of how if I'm a coach and I tell the sprinter I want you to brace your core and hold it stiff and neutral as hard as you can, he's not actually going to be able to do that in the run because he's going to go side to side because that's just what his body's going to do. And maybe the cue of hold it really tight helps him sort of narrow that and do it like fast, right? So it may be that like an incorrect instruction may yield some positive result because the body is going to do what it's going to do. And so like, I'm much more forgiving, but now let's get the instruction correct to truly optimize, right? Because we're in an industry that we have to tear down the walls and start communicating better. That's what I like about your show. And I think we do have to peer pressure challenge now because there's a lot of that male ego that the only way to really tame it and harness it is to, to essentially embarrass the ones who take an incorrect position and refuse to change from it. And then enough cool kids in class just honor what reality is. And I'm very confident. Listen, I'm willing to be wrong, but I'm not in this case. It's just, it's not physically possible to do what they're instructing. And so I think the positive peer pressure is that acknowledgement that there are certain fundamentals. And what I did strategically when I invented the Bosu Ball was I said to myself, I'm like, I'm going to become the world's foremost expert in the subject of balance measured by locomotion. Now, it's still fight and flight. And the more I studied it, the more I realized, oh, it is fight and flight. It's not just flight. But the flight was the objectivity of it. If you're getting faster from here to there to the other place, then that is unequivocally faster. Like you cannot say that it's not because it is. Fight is very subjective, so you can argue forever, right? And you'll never reach a chord. But I strategically said that, and my objective was to come underneath everyone, right? So the way Naudi Aguilar has that messianic sort of, mission where he is God's gift to movement, he's the number one. I think I have a similar impetus in my competitive drive that, I want to be the best at my job, right? I want to be the best biomechanist on the planet Earth. And strategically saying, all right, well, I don't want to be above you. I want to be underneath you. That sort of it adds up to a win for everybody if I'm right. And I God's honest believe I'm right. And I'm not unwilling to learn from others. So the fact that Chung Shi knew something of profundity prior to me knowing it does not dissuade me from going to know that very intimately and completely because it's right. And it demonstrates through the actual, like, oh, wow, I'm doing that better. I can clock it up the hill faster. So I think that that's very important that we challenge people to be honest honest with themselves. Because once you dig in on a position, a lot of people would rather not go further if it threatens their present place. And
so let's talk
especially when
about,
you're,
if you don't mind, I'm going to pivot the conversation a bit to this idea of being honest with yourself, because I find that's what a lot of your products really center around, because they have this kinesthetic feedback. So the rope, you know that you're true because the rope is true. I heard you say that in another interview. And we were at the rope right before we derailed because we're biomechanics, so we just end up talking about everything anyway, right?
We'll
So we were at the ropes. I'd love to just do, because I started getting into the ropes a little bit. From Will, taught me the underhand pattern, the overhand pattern, and the transition between the two. And just recently, I started trying to learn sneaks because my shoulder is feeling good enough to kind of go behind me again after surgery. And it's just such a cool, fun thing. But I wanted to talk about obviously there's the rotational element, because you're not jumping over it. You're not head in the middle jumping over a rope anymore, which I did a lot when I was doing CrossFit. Now I'm doing this rotating. I learned the underhand figure 8 pattern in locomotion from Will teaching me this basic underhand rope pattern. What was your reasoning behind just saying, I'm not going to jump over this rope anymore? And what was your evolution for it? What sort of adaptations to movement do people look to gain by using the RMT rope?
Yeah, so 2004, I met Buddy Lee, and I saw him perform his extraordinary jump rope capacity. And what struck me was the number of times that he didn't jump through it, and how the things whizzing around jump, whiz, jump, right? So what my impetus was, I'm fundamentally lazy, and I'll work super hard to not have to work hard. And jumping rope, especially on the cement surface in my backyard, I didn't want to pound myself into oblivion. And I remembered in high school that I wanted to be fast and I wanted to be able to dunk. And I remember when I was like a freshman and sophomore and I was jumping rope for half an hour, that it would reduce my ability to jump higher. And because I'm pounding myself in this little low resonance, right? And it was on an inappropriate surface. You should jump rope on a sprung surface. You shouldn't jump rope on solid cement, because it ends up being too hard for you. And if you do enough reps, well, you're foregoing the ultimate power that you could get if you wear yourself out doing it. So I was like, I want to get as good as Buddy Lee. In 30 days, I'm going to do this. So I'm not going to waste my effort and my energy jumping over it. And so that's when I literally made a pact with myself that, under no circumstance will you jump this rope for 30 days. And that forced me to figure out what can be done, right? By making that extreme parameters, put me in a hallway that took me to the correct door at the end, as opposed to, oh, well, now I'm doing a trick and I add the jump in. Well, what value was that? I'm not doing this to perform. I'm doing it 100% for the carryover. And the thing about a rope is it gives you the down-up timing, right? The down-up timing, especially when you're ticking it. It'll help you with the double down pulse, because you start understanding that it is this down, up, down, up, down, up. You do a dragon roll especially. You can really feel that. So it was just that positive reinforcement that I'm getting so much. I'm developing the skills so rapidly that in 30 days I was transformed as a person. So suddenly the Rosetta Stone of the rope put this coordination and timing and integration into my body that every other aspect of my life was facilitated to do more with less. I could read faster because of the brain work involved in that. Okay, so I mean, it's just I was going into speed reading, and it actually helped the motor sensory cortices. If we can run the hardware in a movement with this alternating bilateral patterning that resonates the motor sequencing and the sensory feedback, it can harmonize the entirety of your brain. You can get in that feeling of flow and just oh wow. And it's a viable means by which to get there over and over again. And if you jump rope, you might get tired before you get to flow. If you're rolling the rope, you go really slowly and just build it, right? No hurry. right? If it takes me a couple minutes to get into it, who cares, right? So by ramping it up in that way, and then understanding the down up with rotation, that's the WeckMethod logo. It's this with this, and that's all you need. Is those two things gives you everything. And if you sort of put it in a three-dimensional box where I have the frontal, I have the sagittal, I have the transverse, suddenly there's a mental hitch to putting all three together. And like, oh, this exercise is for sagittal and this one's for transverse. It's like, well, then you get Naughty Aguilar twisting around, being very weak. You walk through them. He's smaller than me, granted, but still, he would do far better if he verticalized his rotation, which head over foot is a form of verticalization, because you're not staying plumb square like this. Prior to me, he was running like this, and now he teaches this. And that's the ultimate. You got to give the guy tons of credit, because he's seeking the truth. I mean, I see a lot of these other guys who, what they do is they just ignore it. And now I think the motivation is right, that it's about every step stronger for as many people as possible, and it's a physical education revolution. So I think it's the positive peer pressure. But now back to the product. So after the rope came the Ballast Ball, because I was working with a boy who was in his teenage years who had like 17 brain operations to remove a tumor and then do repair to the damage from extracting the tumor. And he was very ataxic. So he was in a wheelchair and had very much trouble coordinating his strength because of the damage done to the cerebellum in this, brainstem extraction of a tumor to save his life. And so what I did was I took a stability ball and I put like 40 pounds of sand in it. And so it was sort of this immovable weeble wobble that gave him a bouncy surface that had a little bit of that, righting and adjusting factor. So it's not like a bench. And I would have him do sit to stand, so many reps you can't even imagine, because what he needed the coordination. And by having him go to this like slightly challenging surface that he could bounce up and then feel the balance and then have somewhere to go feel the balance, he ended up hiking up Mount Whitney, living independently in China and Italy. Like, wow. We helped transform him, and that was a big tool. That and a staircase was huge. And then the hand coordination, to the degree that we could get it. I had him through months and months of this training kicking a soccer ball. So one of the drills that we would do is I just roll a soccer ball to his left, and he'd, get over there and kick it. And then I'd roll it to his right. He'd come over and kick it. And it was the Ballast Ball that gave us the ability to do that. And then that derived into a stability ball that had, a lot less weight in it, but it keeps it in the same spot, and you can use it as a resistance and a feedback as well. So that was the Ballast Ball. We built, let me think, what was the next? I made one called a bend and flex. So what I did was I took garage door springs, like these massive, hefty springs, and I taped weight at the end of it, and I taped like a nice handle thing at the end of this thing, and it was a push-pull. So I'm on the middle of the garage door spring, I'm on the end of the spring, and there's a weight over here, and I would go boom, boom, boom. And so it's like a body blade on like massive steroids. And it was awesome. But again, like, it's one that I never, took to market, but it was like an invention to like, you get that jolt and the timing of like putting everything into it.
Sounds amazing.
So that one,
it sounds really fun.
You would have liked it. You guys would have liked it. And it was pretty much a one-trick pony. Like, that was the best thing that you could do with it.
Yeah.
But it was awesome. So let's see. And then the RMT Club came. I'm not sure of the sequence. As we're talking, I may think of another one that came in between. But the RMT Club I was a collector of Indian clubs, and I loved them. Right, so I bought I had antique ones, I had little ones, I had big ones, I had metal ones, I had wood ones, plastic ones. So I'm a collector of things. When I was collecting cowboy boots, I had so many cowboy boots. When I was collecting stability, I had so many of them. But so anyway, the clubs, I love them, and it's so primal. The idea of swinging a club, it tunes you into that your ancient ancestors and the DNA that goes all the way back. Right, that's where we come from. So the RMT Club, it was the idea that if I can make it faster, and again, eliminate the inertia to slow it down by having the weight shift. So now I can really focus on speed and power and that like that kind of thing, and then using the sound as a feedback to really punctuate movement. And then less hazard of, if you do make a mistake, you're not canceling Christmas because you took your knee out with the metal club. So, that was the RMT Club was created through that. I created Stax risers for the Bosu Ball. These are these dual purpose. You can fill them with water and use them for resistance, and they raise the Bosu Ball up. It's not my favorite tool. It's very practical for raising the Bosu Ball up. But Chris Chamberlain taught me something very valuable. He was like, never bash a tool. So a Suzanne Sommer Thigh Master, don't bash the tool. Don't bash the tool, right? Why are you bashing the tool? See if there's any utility in it and do something that has utility, but don't bash the tool. Right. And so, I used to bash the tool. Oh, that thing's a pig. No, it's not a good practice to bash the tool because you diminish your own creativity. You diminish your own capacity to take something and make it better. Right. Mm-hmm. So this male ego, bashing something, it takes yourself down and it helps nobody else. So, and Chris is the one who really told me that because he was a carpenter growing up. So he was constantly working with tools, right? And the tool, you have to use a tool, you have to use that tool in the manner in which the specific attenuation of the manner in which that tool functions best, right? A hammer functions, in a certain way, and it attenuates the usage of it, which is a discipline that teaches you a skill that once you attain that skill, you're capable of carrying it over. Whereas if I never mastered what that tool has to offer, well, then I never got to something substantial, and then there's less carryover to another thing. So that being said, a donut with handles on it where I can shift the water, it doesn't excite me that much, right? It's not something that I do regularly, but, if I were to use it, I could find the utility in it. Let's see. The Propulsors came out of, I was at the swap meet and I found these little 2-pound weights and they were in the shape of a blue hemisphere. It was, a metal weight that weighed 2 pounds with a blue vinyl on it. And there were 4 of them. I'm like, how much are these? They're 50 cents each. Well, I'll take all 4. Hold on to these 2. I'll be back for them. And I'm going to run around with these. And so I started double down pulsing because I knew that with 2-pound weights. And it was just the power and length of each stride was just whoa, this feels fun, right? Boom. Now, the inertia involved, I was very, very sore the next day, right here, because you have to slow that weight down. So you can't go with the frequency that is fast, but you certainly get that feeling of boom, boom. I'm delivering more force to the ground to elicit more connective tissue in that equation. And then I started experimenting with different weights. So I went to Home Depot and I bought all these metal things clips and different weights. And, okay, well, what does 2 pounds, what does 1 pound, what does 3/4, what does 8 ounces, what does, 4 ounces, what do these feel like? And that's when I was sort of, going through that. And I was like, wait a minute. RMT Club's got that shift, and if it shifts, it's going to eliminate that inertia for all intents and purposes. So I literally had, right in my dining room, I had a big bucket filled with like aggregate that goes in RMT Clubs, and I took an empty vitamin jar, which isn't optimal, but you can get the concept, and I put some of the shot in it, and I went boom, and I was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. Like I was like, this may be my greatest invention, because it's just so counterintuitive that weight in the distal extremities could make going up a hill easier and faster. If you're running an arc, a figure eight or a circle or a bend, you will run it faster with propulsors done right than you will without. What? Because the force is not vertical in those cases if you're running the arc. There's a tangential line, and I can get deeper into the tangent when I can deliver that force. And we've done it over and over and over again. Again, to me, it's insane that the fitness industry and the sports performance industry has not embraced propulsors just absolutely fully. It's a tool that should be ubiquitous because it checks a box that didn't exist prior. No one had ever instructed it that I know of or that we know of. Like punch down to run. What? Huh? I'm supposed to swing them. So it's, again, this is the thing where when I'm talking to these people like a Kelly Starrett, a Joe DeFranco, like the Mark Bells, they have enough success in their own right that they're not threatened by a new concept, right? And I think that just when enough people sort of give permission to the class that just doesn't like anything that I do because of the Bosu Ball, I think what you'll see that we have a huge opportunity for like just a sea change. And again, I just go back for the regular people, not the people listening to this, but just a regular person. I would say walk stronger. It takes no additional time out of your day. All you need to know is the technique, right? And just practice it, feel it. Go up a hill, walk up your stairs and do it the one way and then do it the other way and do it whichever way feels better. Okay, right? And then do it mindfully for 21 days, 3 weeks. And then you're set forever. Like if you change where you put your car keys, you're going to go to the drawer where they used to be for the first week. It's just reflexively, you're going to open the wrong drawer because that's where they used to be. And your muscle memory and your automaticity just is going to do what it remembered. And so, but 3 weeks later, now you don't go to the wrong place anymore. You always go to the right place. And so I think that the biomechanically, that's the message. I won't be the Pied Piper for just fundamental balance. And I think it's true balance, which means that you have the ability to stop and reverse it. Like Feldenkrais talked about reversibility. Go at a pace where you can stop and you can reverse so that you're sure that you own it, right? Because if I'm forced to continue going and sort of, recover, and if you look into the textbooks and the sort of understanding, the conventional wisdom amongst the biomechanical experts is, well, walking is a series of controlled falls where you catch yourself. I'm like, really? 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 That's what walking is? No, it's not. Walking is going from one perfectly secure, stable base to another perfectly secure, stable base. And at no point in time were you out of balance if you're walking well.
Will kind of talked about it as having a next move ready.
Yes,
if you have to balance to catch yourself and like bounce back, like you don't have your next move. Like if you're in true balance, you can go wherever you want to go because you're in balance.
Yeah, commitment. Once you are committed, there is no going back. So if you're not walking with the head coinciding and meeting at the station with the foot, well, you can't stop. You're forced into that next step because you're not controlling it. So Will, I mean, the more ways that we can say it and the different angles which we can, shine light on it and describe it, I think the more useful. Because I think some people will respond to certain language and cues and people, right? Somebody doesn't like me, they're not likely to listen to me. And if they like you, they're more apt to listen to you. And if you're saying the same thing, even if it's a little bit different in its description, but it points in the correct direction, that's how we make a profound change. Like change doesn't have to be this laborious thing that takes forever. We can snap our fingers and if everyone in the fitness industry said, all right, let's walk stronger. Let's just make that a goal, that we teach our clients and others the information to walk stronger. Within a year's time, you could take back pain and start to tick it down substantially. And instead of 80% of people experiencing crippling back pain, maybe we could get it to 20% of people experiencing crippling back pain. And wouldn't that be wonderful? How wonderful would the world be when everybody had the deep psychological confidence of balance that we don't even think about, right? If your body and your nervous system is afraid, which it is if it's not in balance, okay? It's afraid. It's tensing, and it won't let go because it has to protect you. There's no choice.
Trying to find that balance. Yeah.
And when you watch like an actor or politician, someone on stage, the reason why they have a dais is because it gives you something to brace and be substantial on. It's very hard for someone to stand on a stage without the dais to put their hands on and to feel, oh, I have this barrier between me and this intimidating audience, and my balance is set. If you just touch a wall with just a tiny bit of pressure, it's amazing how it improves your balance. It's incredible. Like, you close your eyes, you can't balance on one foot. Touch the wall. Don't put pressure, and you'll be able to do it. So to have the capacity to stand strong without the assistance or aid of anything else is a deep-rooted form of confidence that is the bed and the garden and the fertilizer for confident mental feeling and state.
I think we have to instill into the public that it's okay to be intuitive, to feel yourself, and to have ownership of your own body. Because literally what got me was watching your video on YouTube, the one where you have a green line that says head over foot. I literally came upon that video maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I started doing it right away. I went outside and I'm like, this is it. I'm like, I've been educated for 15 years. Nobody's ever told me this. I feel it right away. I have to trust my own body that that's the way to do it. Then I built upon that, and now I can, move side to side, cardinal planes quickly like this, which I wanted to touch on as well, right? I kind of want to bring it back to get more specific with the shakers. I was just on a cliff, or like a very steep grade going sideways. I was using the same side stride. Well, what I think is the same side stride from you, right? And I could balance myself way better with my arms in one direction, right? Here, when it's there. And I can also use it here if I wanted to and spin, right? So is that what is the same side stride to you, and do you teach it, and what applications do you use it in?
Okay, great question again. So the same side stride is basically the maintenance. I'll put it here so you can see my mouth. So the same side stride is basically the being in some degree of coil, where you have the high side, long side, and the coil side, and being capable of changing your weight without changing or disturbing the center with this position. It's extremely useful for running an arc. So if I'm running normally, I'm going side to side. And if I run an arc going side to side, I'm coming out of the arc, I'm coming in the arc. But if I same side stride, I'm in the arc the whole time. You feel that, Will?
Yeah.
And going down a hill, same side stride, you don't have vertical displacement. When you're jogging slowly, there's a vertical displacement where you're doing that. But if I same side stride, it puts me on this that plane where I'm not displacing my center of mass higher. So if I'm going down a hill, do I want to go higher and lower and higher and lower? Or do I want to just come down the hill without the extra burden of having to absorb the extra inch, right?
Now, do you turn your hips with?
No. It's here, and you're not trying to run sideways or anything. You can still be oriented perfectly straight. And it's just that movement right there.
I mean, if you're going downhill though, and you're trying to, so if I ski or go downhill and it's really steep, I try to turn my hips to help me with the force, right? Because I'm not talking just like a small hill, it's very steep.
Okay, yeah.
Like turn your hips like this, and I can do the same side here. I'm still going this way.
Yeah,
right?
you
so
yes, you if
can turn your hips, right?
Yeah, and well, this is another case where it's like trust yourself, right? And like we say, path of independence. And if you have found a way that for you it is better because you feel better and it performs better, well, we have to honor and we have to respect that, and we have to encourage people to explore and find what works for them. So kudos for that. And I will explore downhill. Like one of the ways that you can go downhill very efficiently as well is turn out and roll down the hill. So you're catching it with the outside edge and coming down like this, and you can sort of go here, 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 here. Play with that one and see how that feels coming down a hill, especially on a staircase, where a staircase, I'll either go here or I'll go here.
Yeah,
so
that's what I
if
do on
I'm
staircases
going downstairs fast, I'm going down 3 or 4 steps at a time, and I'm probably going down like sideways like that. You know what I mean? And I may like sort of do that, just depending upon the, how fast I'm going and how much control I have. But generally speaking, if I go down a staircase, I'm going to do this and this and this and this because I have more room when I'm here. If I came down here, the foot is longer and it might clip a step. So there's that practical consideration of it.
Do you have any questions, Anthony, with the shakers?
Yeah, with the propulsors, I noticed that you stopped offering any other weights other than the 12 ounces. And I know Will had some earlier versions that are a little bit lighter, I think. What are yours? Are yours the 8?
Yeah.
So you used to offer multiple. What was the decision-making process in choosing to only use the 12-ounce propulsors?
Again, great question. So these are prototypes of what when they were made by hand. So it's different than what we have now. And what it is for certain containers, you have an optimal amount of fill in it. And for this container, the optimal amount of fill was 8 ounces. And so that was our sort of departure point. We'd made these in 12s, but it wasn't optimized for 12. And so it was the first shot of when you mass produce a product, you have to build molds, and it's very expensive to build one unit because you have to spend, $100,000 and more to build one, which gives you the capacity to build thousands, right? So we made the size container that we thought would fit 8 ideally, and we tested it. And since we're good at it, we can find tremendous utility from the 8s because we're good at it. So that extra distance of travel, you have to be better at it. And the faster you can go, the more you can get from it. So what happened was we just sort of, ever testing, relentless pursuit of better. I opened one up and I put some extra in it just to test it. And when I felt the 12, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, 12 is the optimal for this container. And the jolt is much more, it's much easier to sense and harness and feel with the 12s to get that definitive jolt that elicits that recoil. And the distance traveled is easier for someone to pattern. So we will eventually build other sizes, but I also have in the same patent spring-loaded propulsors that once we sort of get it off the ground and get the success, I will eventually build spring-loaded ones that have sensors. So it will give you force value, it will give you repetitions, it will be quiet, it'll be like a very springy, sharp action that is even easier. Now that being said, I think there will always be utility in the mass moving as well. So it is a different experience. I think the preference for most people would be the spring-loaded ones. It's just a lot more cost and R&D to get the spring-loaded one right. So that and I can anticipate different sizes and such, but first we need to normalize the activity, and that's the frustrating part, is that the Fosbury flop comes along and it takes 8 years for the experts to acknowledge that it's better. So that's a technique. It's not even a product. It's a technique that was denied. I mean, 4 years after Fosbury set the Olympic record with a gold medal, 4 years later, it's a lower jump, right, to win the gold medal, lower than Dick Fosbury with the old technique. Now, how is that even possible in hindsight? If we look at the coaches and the biomechanists and all those people, in hindsight, it's very embarrassing. It's very, very embarrassing, because it's either pure ignorance or dishonesty or some combination of the two, right? It can be nothing else. It's either ignorance, you didn't realize it, which really, really, or it's some level of not being honest with yourself and others because you can't get over the fact that someone else created something better, right? So, you know, the horse and buggy maker, he didn't like Henry Ford, right? Because he didn't get to make so many horse and buggies anymore, because the guy came along with something that just works a little better. So that is the unfortunate human reality, is that those in a position of power and authority tend to shun innovation that would displace what that power and authority has in place. So if I'm the high jump coach for the Olympic team, and I've taught you the past 15 years how to do it, and now suddenly we're going to change the technique, well, maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I don't even have the capacity. Maybe I have to have an empty cup and sort of figure out how to do it before I can even teach it well. So who the hell wants to go backward that far? Right? So again, and this is the phenomenon that's happening with the propulsors, is you have a terrified class of men with egos and, you know, and resting on a whole bevy of misinformation, because, you know, all these science, you know, projects and stuff and the peer-reviewed stuff, I mean, there's a lot of good in it for sure, but there's also a whole lot of, you just missed the donkey entirely. The tail is over there, and you're just not even in the right ballpark with this brace your core super stiff and neutral. And even the athlete like a Michael Johnson, who's one of the greatest sprinters ever, he will state unequivocally that his head did not move when he ran. But we go to the videotape and head moving, but from the side it ain't moving, right? From the side he's not running like a pigeon. It's perfectly still from the side. But from the front, okay, Michael, guess what you were doing, right? You're doing what you don't even think you're doing. And you're the best. And you're the best. And so people listen to you. And so you end up inadvertently just keeping this misconception alive and further ingraining it, because who the hell wants to disagree with the best, right? Oh, no. So that's a, you know, propulsors deserve to be ubiquitous because it gives any athlete a better first step. A better first step. If that's all it did, it's so valuable. And it relieves burden from going up a hill. You're able to run the bases faster, as an example, especially because of that arc. And now there's just less burden and there's greater speed for all that you do.
So another question I have here on the propulsor, as the beads are coming down, right? That's what you want to harness, the bead coming down, and then shoot, and you're waiting for that to happen. Your connective tissue is basically recoiling as the beads are coming down, and you're harnessing more energy coming out of that. Is that true?
It's interesting. Well, here's the theory of operation that's in the patent is basically as your foot is approaching the ground contact, right? So your foot's approaching the ground contact, the pulsar is moving down in that moment, and the weight is at the top of it because you're moving much faster than gravity. So the weight is displaced to the top of the container prior to the foot initiating ground contact. So when the foot initiates the ground contact, you're still moving down with the propulsor, and it is a microsecond after contact that the pulsar hits, And then there's a microsecond as that force finds the floor or the ground, and then adds to this spike in peak force between land and launch. So the pulsar, and that's why it has that like fluted design to give it a little bit of a delay component, so it's not hitting just a fraction of a second too fast, so that you can deliver and receive. And so once you spike the peak force by pulsing just after initiation of contact and just before peak force. And then what happens is now, boom, it creates that ricochet effect that, boom, accelerates the arm up faster. And you can see that in slow motion footage where it's coming down, and then the up is even faster. And then that up faster, when you stop at the top, it hits the top and gives you a little bit of that lift, and then you come down. So that's basically how you harness it, and it coincides with your stride. And because there's no inertia in it, we can go at a pace that is just as fast and even faster than what you're capable of doing in a run. So you're not going to outrun 5 steps per second, but you can do this 5 times in a second for 10 seconds or 30 seconds if you train it. So that's the mechanism and means by which it works. And it also has the audible feedback, which times the body. So nothing integrates your timing like audible, because audible in reality is tactile. The sound wave is hitting the eardrum, and it's a percussive event where, and if it's loud enough and powerful enough, you're going to shake from that contact. So light moves much faster than sound, but your perception of light is slower than your perception of sound, because sound is hitting you with a tactile feel, whereas light is something that you can't feel the impact. And that timing, and if it sounds right, it is right, is incredibly valuable for organizing your body. Like if you have everybody march in cadence, you're going to go further with less effort than if you're randomized, because the power of the collective and the group and the timing adds up to this energetic, like, oh, wow, it's, and that's science. The only reason the military breaks cadence is if you're going over a bridge and you don't want to resonate the bridge to vibrate and knock it down. So they break cadence on a bridge, but as soon as you're on solid ground, you want that cadence, right? So that's another aspect of it.
So I got 15 minutes before we have to wrap up, and I really wanted to cover the soul steps too before we finished, because
Yes.
it's a very interesting product that for those who don't know what the soul step is, I'll pull up a picture of it too, but in your own words, quick overview. Oh, there it is right there. So overview, obviously it has a very unique pitch, and it has a very specific intent behind the way that you designed it. So can you kind of go over what the pitch is and why you would want to put your feet like that, and what the kind of biomechanical effects of spending time in that position? What applications do you use it for?
Well, so first I want to say that we are finding more and more application with it for more and more objectives. And just this morning, I was doing negative slope here to train the big toe. Unbelievably awesome. So you can use this thing in more ways than we know right now. But I arrived at this both through the sort of Western scientific, okay, like, okay, we want the foot to be doing this type of thing. But I also arrived at it with this esoteric, mathematics of movement and the divisions of a circle. So basically, this surface here elevates the inside ball of the foot and big toe higher than any other spot. So you can put pressure to the inside ball of the foot and big toe without collapsing, because you have a structural support that doesn't let it collapse. And the lowest point is a diagonal across from the big toe to the outside of your heel. So the outside of your heel is the lowest spot, the big toe is the highest spot. And so what that does is it will tend to pitch your weight that direction. So there's a directional there, which all you do is you just, it allows you to position your body millimeters forward to gain more springiness and cock the spring with absolutely no threat of collapse. So that's how that angle works and communicates. And then the inside heel is the second highest spot that is higher than the outside ball of the foot and pinky toe. So from the inside of the heel to the outside ball of the foot, you have a direction going forward and across. So there's an X going from the big toe back to the outside heel, and from the inside heel to the forward to the outside ball of the foot and toes. So you're getting this sort of pitch that's putting you like I'm moving right now, but you're not moving on it, but that's the energetic. And the criticism that the GOTA guys say about this is that it puts you on your heels. Well, no, that's not true. That's not how you use it. What you do is you pitch on it so that you can actually millimeters forward with the center of mass. So you can create an advantageous angle that springs it. And I am personally not enthused or impressed by training inversion and eversion in a singular plane. So I think that it may accommodate a bow-legged person, but for many people, it's not even appropriate. And you'll cause problems as you're trying to, you're taking a step forward, you're taking a step back. And the complexity of this in terms of divisions of a circle, well, first let me say this. On the Bosu Dome, I had been working on something called a Weck deck for more than 10 years. And it stemmed from sort of the Bosu Dome and this extraordinary feel that I got from the Bosu Dome that this mimics it has a resemblance to the force of a specific position on the dome or the Bosu Ball, where it puts the big toe highest and it puts the outside heel the lowest, right? And it puts this lower than this. So you have that dynamic going on. And so that, I think that was just a subconscious connection to that shape that like I was questing after. And then I remember the night that I came up with it, it was the esoteric. So a circle is 360 degrees. The first division of a circle is 180 degrees. The second division is 90 degrees. The third division is 45 degrees. The fourth division is 22.5, and the fifth division is 11.25. So what I did was I went to the fifth division, and I created 11.25 in the slope, and then I went to the fourth, and I rotated the slope 22.5. And that's what creates the unique pitch, is that it's a complex combination of one angle is the slant, and the other angle is the rotation that gives you these unique properties of the relationship of the 4 points as we define sort of front, two sides, inside, outside, and back, inside, outside. And it was one of those aha moments where I was with a bunch of guys in the lab late. It was relatively late at night. And I was like, okay, set this up, 11.25, let's go 22.5. And everybody stood on it. And it was just that like, oh my God, this is special. Like, oh my God, like, wow, this feels incredible. And so that was how I actually arrived at it, was, me being crazy with circles and angles. But it's almost the same thing as being on the Bosu Dome in a very specific spot, and then describing it from a Western anatomical, rationale and the body weight and just the relationship. That also makes sense. So it's one of those things where the simplicity of it is so awesome. And we use it downhill and we use it uphill. If you use it uphill, it encourages external torsion in the body. If you use it downhill, it encourages internal torsion of the body. And now when I'm using it opposite here, so I'm putting my feet on the inward, where you would think, oh, why would I want to do that? Well, guess what? If we're engaging the big toe, we're fortifying that inside edge. And you can feel the security in it when you feel it. And that's that trust your body, trust yourself. It feels right. Guess what? Probably is right. And Justin James, who's the long drive golfer who I work with, he was in the lab this week because he was out here doing something, and he put him inversed and was doing an exercise with a kettlebell to do what he needs to do, which is to translate his weight from the back foot to the front foot with an exchange that's highly dynamic. And this inside edge thing that he was doing, he did it both downhill and he did it uphill. And in particular for the uphill opposite, he was just like, oh, he got off and he's like, oh my gosh, this is like, this is working. Because that's another thing that we like to do here is after we perform an exercise, the question we ask is, okay, did it work? Like, you know, we got a long snapper who's, you know, NFL long snapper, and it's like, we do something, and it's like, okay, well, now snap the ball. Did it work? Right? Because if it didn't work, why did we do it? So we want to facilitate the nervous system to be capable of doing the tasks that you want to do. And so we're constantly checking, like, how's that feel? Does that feel like it's going to help you? Let's see it. Let's video it. Let's study it. Let's measure it. Okay, great. So everything that we do in here is carryover 100% to movement. And because that's what we specialize in. So we don't specialize in sort of, you know, the sets and reps and the pharmacology to make yourself bigger. I think anybody who claims to be an expert on hypertrophy that doesn't have a degree or at least a lot of experience with the drugs, you're no expert in hypertrophy. You're just not.
So the soul steps are really, really cool. And I like hearing the story of the math behind it too, because again, like you look at these what looks like just foot wedges and you're like, okay, well, why would I want to stand on these? And again, you're creating a very, very specific pitch, obviously multiple uses. I like the story before we started, you told about Chris Chamberlain just healing up his, he had some hip problems that he had.
What had happened was when he was like playing football many years ago, he, you know, jammed his leg and like, you know, did something to his hip that was just a, you know, an inconvenience for more than a decade type of thing where it's like, okay, it feels a little out, you know, it never got back in quite right. Then he had the soul steps and he was sort of rocking his baby boy to sleep in the middle of the night. And he's got this, you know, hard ceramic tile floor. He's like, ugh, you know, he got to stand on it. So he stood on these and he did just that figure eight where he's just sort of rocking his boy to sleep. And he did that. And just that motion on this pitch corrected the injury that had lingered with some restriction. And now it's as good as new. It's whoa, right? And my brother does not exercise. So his version of exercise is, okay, you know, I'm going to run a marathon, right? So that, you know, that'll force me to run and train, right? Or I go to boot camp, but I haven't been there in 6 months. I got to go back. So that's his idea of exercise. And he said to me with these, he stood on them. He goes, David, I like these because they make me feel better. And I like that they're simple. Like he didn't have to do anything but stand on them. And in our office here, I sit at my desk and I will stand out there and I both sit with them and I stand with them. And in our office, we got those desks that go up and down, you know, so you can change it. And the guys in here under everybody's desk is a set of soul steps because they actually use them. So it's not like, oh, you know, work here, you got to do it. It's like you work here. Oh, you want to set? Okay, great. You don't want to set? Well, we haven't had that yet.
Yeah, there you
go. So I really think that the soul step is a special. I think this is a special. Partly, well, a lot of perspiration for sure, but partly that flash of inspiration where it's like combine the 5th and the 4th divisions and 4 and 5. And I play this sort of like phonetic game to fortify, 45, right? So that those things, like, they mean something to me. And if it yields a good result, well, then great. Dumbo has a feather and he's flying. Like, I don't care as long as I get the result that I'm after.
Mm-hmm. So we have 5 minutes. And there was one more thing that I wanted to cover before we wrap up today. And we've covered a lot because, again, you're a very prolific inventor. You've created a lot of really cool tools, some of which I hope to see the prototypes of one day, just to just to see them.
Yeah.
But the WeckMethod punch pads, episode 46
yeah.
of the Art of Move, we talked to you about the core fist stuff. We talked about some proper punching techniques, and this is a pad that you use to be able to do some of the core fist positions while you're punching. And so if you wanted to have a heavy bag, but you didn't want to put your hand in a glove, is that the idea behind it?
Yeah, well, the idea behind it is that I don't have to do damage while I'm training. And this padding in here is like a sort of a gel neoprene that provides a surprising amount of protection. Like they're so thin and so little, but it's incredible how you punch and it's just like, that didn't hurt. And it doesn't matter. Like most people, when they put them on at first, are going to do this. And it works for this too. So, okay, great. But what I like about it most is its bare knuckle range. So I'm learning my range. And then if I'm going to put on a glove, okay, that's extra here. But if I train in a glove out here and I don't go to bare knuckle range, I don't know where my true bone range is. And so the bone range to me is the most valuable, and then factor it into whatever apparatus you have to use for your sport. So that's, for me, what I like about it. And they're just so convenient. And I have anger issues. And for me, sometimes just smashing into something and just punching it with everything I have and have it be a satisfying experience where I'm not hurting myself and I can do it again tomorrow, it just makes me feel so much better. And I have powerful penetrating punches because I know the bones and I know how to integrate everything in my body. And these things allow me to do it with frequency and without pain. So they're just incredible. And then what I'll also do with them is I will build my bone structure. So I'll literally be watching something on YouTube at night. And I'm doing no damage, but my bones, that piezoelectric pressure, that calcium, and I mean, you look at those things, that's a talent, that's earned right there. That is 6 months in the hospital and sudden death. I like that joke.
Love it.
So, the punch pads are hardly even an invention. I mean, it's just it's a knuckle protector that, and you can do great push-ups and stuff on them, but if it works, then I like it and it gives me the result, and it gives me no restriction to find that pattern. Whereas in a boxing glove, what I would advise anybody who's doing boxing is try to get to here in the glove so that you're here, like Bernard Hopkins did it, not plumb square like that. And just that much triangulation will make a difference. So in a boxing glove, you only get to here in a boxing glove anyway. So you don't get your fingers down. There's glove in between. So if you do that and just feel what you have with just that versus doing it there, it's better when it's triangulated.
Definitely.
You feel that, Will?
Definitely, 100%. I'll be getting those just because there's not really a great alternative. This is exactly what I need to bare knuckle punch and not have to worry about scraping the knuckles or hitting too hard. You know what I'm hitting?
It's like a gloveless box. Yeah, gloveless boxing glove is kind of what I.
Yeah, it's like a glove. And what's also good about it too is, let's say you wanted to punch something and then go right into a TRX. You don't even have to take them off because you have your hands here, right? So it's extremely convenient in that sense as well. And again, fight and flight, that's my litmus test for everything. And part of fight is using your hands as tools / weapons effectively. And this allows me to train that where, like you said, Will, I don't have to take some days off because I got this big, gaping blister that, cut open. And there's nothing more frustrating than like I'm getting the thing I'm punching all bloody, and it's going to be a pain in the ass until it heals over.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if I keep working out, I'm just prolonging the process of healing it. So to have no tears or damage to the skin is a tremendous value. And then then when you get like a water bag, one of those like, you know, the water bags, it like claps, and you just it's just so satisfying. I mean, it's just like you hit it, and it's just like you know when you just rung the bell.
As that again, there's that example of the kinesthetic feedback that you know when you get that audible, that's how you know it is. Well, David, this was an awesome episode. We covered a ton of ground, even more than just your inventions. I think I got like man, I'm thinking about a lot right now. But if anyone wants to find your products, they can find them at WeckMethod.com or shop.weckmethod.com for the actual shop. On WeckMethod.com, you can actually get a lot of the educational resources on how to use a lot of these products. That was one thing I was really impressed by, is once I got the Propulsors, I actually was able to access all these different videos that you and Chris Chamberlain had produced and instructed on how to use them. I'm learning how to use the rope better because of these awesome resources. So WeckMethod.com is an amazing resource if you want to either buy these products, learn how to use them. You can follow David at the David Weck on Instagram and at WeckMethod on Instagram if you want to see the kind of like business page.
Oh, and also
Go ahead.
And Chris Chamberlain as well. I suggest everybody out there, if you want to see WeckMethod in action, where it's like, oh, geez, that's a foundation that lets me do extraordinary things. Chris Chamberlain is an account that you should follow.
He is at underscore Christopher.Chamber LIN underscore.
Yes.
So underscore Christopher.Chamberlain underscore. And he is honestly, he has some awesome videos, man. Like you can watch him move super fluidly and also throw around ridiculous weights. It's like he's probably the first person that I've seen that kind of reconciled the problem of being strong and being a fluid mover at the same time.
Functional, strong, all things equal, stronger is better, right? So we don't want to poo-poo strength because that's a big mistake.
Yeah, and it's okay to, I think it's okay to criticize the way that people approach strength and sacrificing movement quality, in the name of strength, because I've done that and I thought it would make me a better athlete. And it didn't. It made me more injury prone. It made me robotic. But I think, this is, these conversations are getting me more hopeful to, allow the meathead in me to come back out in full force and still maintain some fluidity of movement and efficiency and locomotion. So,
yeah, well, and make you stronger than the meathead. That's really
exactly.
Cool. Right?
Exactly. Well, David, thanks so much for doing this episode. This is episode 54 of The Art of Move. If you listen on iTunes or Spotify, please leave us a review and a rating. You can watch these live on nofilter.net. And if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching our new YouTube channel. Again, David, looking forward to the next one that we have with you. We'll catch you next time on The Art of Move. Thanks for watching, guys.
Have a good one, guys.